It's interesting because right now, what the genre that's really popular for this age group I'm writing for is also graphic novels. So we're seeing that trend in youth that they want something that's really colorful and engaging. And of course they do, because of so much screen time that they're spending in their lives. Of course they're looking for something similar maybe in what they're reading too.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody. Today we're speaking with Jessica Speer, award-winning author of The Phone Book and other guidebooks for kids and teens that tackle the tricky topics of technology, friendships, and surviving middle school. Jessica has a knack for unpacking complex issues in ways that resonate with young readers. So we're going to be talking all about her books, her writing tips, and of course, her experiences on today's episode. And without further ado, Jessica, welcome to the show. It's so great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too, Danielle. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Of course, and I just have to say, I love the way you talk. Like you just have such a warm, welcoming tone.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
sweet,
It works it works well with kids. I'm telling you, maybe
Yeah,
that's how I got into the work I'm in, is it, I've been called Mother Goose a lot, so there you go.
Oh, yeah, even the way you just did that, you went from, super excited to, kind of like a whisper voice when you said Mother Goose. I think that must resonate in your writing, the way that you kind of know to, you know, emphasize certain phrases and words to get your point across. That's really sweet, I like that.
Thank you.
But yeah, hey, before we talk about the books, I think it's important to chat about you a little bit. So, I mean, you mentioned a little bit that, that's how you resonate with kids. I'm assuming your direct work experience, kind of is what influenced your books for teens. So, what led you to start writing and what inspired you to do so?
Yeah, well, I what inspired me to write for kids was my kids, and I know a lot of kids or
Mm.
people that write for kids, often their kids get them into that. So when my kids were I've got 2 daughters, when they were little, 4 and 6, and I was doing a lot of reading with them, I started writing for kids, but not at all writing what I'm writing now. So this is maybe a typical author journey. I started to write more what I was reading to them, which is really typical. I joined this big organization called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators just to learn the market and the craft. But my background is in social sciences. So my work is all over the place. I work with a lot of nonprofits and, for kids and families. I've also taught. I'm actually still doing work with kids that grew out of what I started writing about. But once I realized, after a few years of writing some books that never sold, I took the author advice of, write what you know. So that's what I started to do. I was running at that time some friendship groups for kids to help kids, navigate friendships and learn some social skills. So that is what grew into my first book. And then I kept on going from there.
Understood. Okay, so it kind of just derived from your personal experiences, your passions, and ultimately, I do love that phrase, "Write what you know," because a lot of authors might try to dabble in other topics they're not aware of, and it works well for them. But it's a surefire way to make sure that you are passionate about your topic and you're knowledgeable about it too, and it's what you know. So it's
Yeah.
great that you kind of did that. So yeah, really cool stuff. And I'm curious to know then, I mean, the books also they blend like social science, stories, activities. But like I mentioned, it connects with the reader. So tell us about that approach. Like why choose those exact, methods to present your information?
Well, I'm writing on tricky topics, for kids. So the only way, a kid is going to read that if it's really engaging to them. So right from the get-go, I knew that. So my first book, which grew out of that friendship program, it's called BFF or NRF, not really friends, and it's a guide to happy friendships. That's the one that grew out of a friendship program, and I just knew from that direct work that kids loved quizzes. Like, for instance, that book starts with a quiz, how healthy is my friendship? And there's another quiz in that book, how are my friendship skills? And so there's a lot of interaction, and I found that pulls kids in. It draws them in to the subject. So they're not just reading about this topic. It's dives right into their world. My latest book, which is called The Phone Book, which is all about helping kids develop healthy digital habits. I knew that had to be fun because, I'm competing with phones. They could read this book or they could pick up an iPad or a phone. So I knew my competition there. So that had to be really fun. So that's filled with fun facts and trivia and, just ways to engage kids, so that it's not just a typical read through book. It's really interactive.
Understood. Yeah, and I was looking through all of your books. I think we mainly want to focus on the phone book, but I do like that you mentioned the BFF and NRF guide. I mean, that's something that, of course, all teens, everybody in the world really has to deal with. Like, who is a real friend, who's not. So, really important stuff there. I'm curious to know, like, really briefly, what is like one of the most key challenge that people face when they're navigating friendships?
Yeah, in our younger years, it's often just the awareness of so many things that are actually normal, but they feel uncomfortable. So that book, I've got 9 friendship truths, which through my work I found really resonate with kids, but it also resonates with adults. And one of those friendship truths is friendships have different phases and change over time. So just that knowledge for young people is like, "Oh, okay, so this friendship isn't, feeling like it used to. I might be in this point where this friendship is changing." And that's never easy as humans at any age, but just knowing that's actually pretty normal. Our relationships ebb and flow, especially our friendships. So yeah, that's one it's just packed with truths that I find really resonate with kids and adults too.
Absolutely. I like that. And that's what you have to have, right? Just the truths, the eye-opening things that the kids won't usually see because they have like their blinders on, they're focused on whatever it is that's right in front of them. So you gotta, open your eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I guess that kind of directly goes into the phone book too, in a way, because being in a phone, you're just in your phone, you're blind to what's going on outside of you. So it's a guide to help you navigate life with the cell phone. Is that correct? So like
Correct. Yeah.
talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about that.
So this book, I actually wrote this one during the pandemic when we were all getting sucked into our phones, and I was noticing that change in myself. I was noticing that change in my kids, in my community, and that got me really curious. So I dove into the research, and that book is really about building awareness, not only awareness about like just being a good digital citizen and being safe online, but also helping kids and teens be aware of just the tech business model. In fact, the first chapter of that book is, why tech companies want you staring at your screen. It kind of goes into that business model of advertising and data collection, just so that kids are really informed consumers. So they know why all of us are so drawn to our devices all the time and what's driving that and some of the techniques behind that. So it's filled with like fun facts but also really positive stuff because of course our world is a digital world now, so I'm not negative. I'm just sharing kind of here's some awareness, again building some awareness of how to navigate this world with this device in your hand so that you still have balance in your life and and are achieving the goals you want to achieve.
I love that. Yeah, so you kind of have to find that balance. That's hard for even adults to do. So I'm sure that's kind of what sparked the inspiration to write this one. So yeah, I love that. I'm curious to know then, like, what is one tip then that parents and kids can find very helpful in managing the phone technology? What would you recommend? Like if you
Yeah,
had to pick one.
well, and so once I kind of talk about what persuasive design is and how that is so effective, just pulling us all in, that we all have to stay really focused on what it is we really want to make sure we're including in our lives, because it's so easy, especially for teens, to get so drawn into these devices that we might actually not be doing things that we really, really want to do. Whether it's learning to play the guitar or getting out on our skateboard or writing a book, so just being aware of how much time we are spending on our devices so that we're making time to do the other things we want to do in our lives too.
Understood. Yeah, no, that's really important. Again, it relates to everybody, not just kids, but adults too, for sure. Um, I'd love to transition into the writing process itself a little bit then, because it must be interesting to kind of gear everything to that right audience. We spoke of this a little bit, making sure it's engaging for, younger ones and, relatable to them. But do you have any tips or tricks in particular for like voice and like making sure everything really like hits home with teens when they're writing a book?
Since I'm writing more nonfiction guides, for me, it's really important to keep it light and just easy, easy reads. In fact, since the primary readers of my books are mostly preteens, I would say 8 to 13 to 14, I make them so easy and unintimidating to read. So they're packed with color and illustration and fun fonts and, just different ways to connect with the book. So for me, that I found that really important. So, and I've heard that from readers too, is that this book it's not scary to pick up. My books are not that thick. They're about 140 pages and they're filled with cool, comics too. So in this day and age, that's really important, especially if you're writing what I'm writing, which is more nonfiction. Now, of course, some kids are still going to dive into a novel, a really long novel, but given the topics I'm focusing on, short, sweet, fun, to the point has been really effective.
Understood. No, I love that. And that's kind of what you have to do to make it engaging. That's all kids want, like short, fun, sweet. So
Yep.
just to keep their attention. I mean, it's now that I think about it, it's almost like a paradox. To get off of the phone to read the book is a challenge in itself. You know what I mean? So must be interesting to kind of think of it that way, to kind of get them to put it down enough time to read the book. So it's good they're able to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because right now, what the genre that's really popular for this age group I'm writing for is also graphic novels. So we're seeing that trend in youth that they want something that's really colorful and engaging. And of course they do, because of so much screen time that they're spending in their lives. Of course they're looking for something similar, maybe in what they're reading too.
Absolutely. So I love that. So really awesome tips right there. Now also, and this isn't your only book. I mean, you've got a ton out there. But I'm assuming there's gotta be something else on the radar. I'm more curious to know if you have any upcoming projects that people might be excited to learn about.
I've got one that's done and it's coming out in 2027. So
Ooh.
I know it's in the design stage now. My books are traditionally published, which takes a lot longer, but it's also illustrated and same age range, I would say, preteens, early teens, and it's actually on mindfulness. So given the world we're in today and the rates of anxiety and depression, especially in that age range, I wanted to write something that really talks about that. And I do work with kids in that area as well. So just again, keeping it really simple. It's
Right.
actually we're still working on the title for that book, but there's really 10 things that kids can actively do to help when life gets overwhelming or they're having a hard time focus or feeling very unsettled. So, but in my typical style, there'll be cool illustrations and fun graphics. And so it's so, so easy to digest. That's my hope. That's coming out in 2027.
Right. So I guess I'm just curious to know why not 2026? Is that take that long for the formatting stage? Or just trying to do you have a certain goal in
Yeah.
mind for that?
So the publisher kind of chooses the season. So that's out of my hand. Like once I write the book, and if it's acquired traditionally through a traditional publisher, they look at their schedule and they launch it in the season that they are going to launch it in. So that possibly could change, but there tends to be a long lead time, just because once we go through the editing and then it goes to the illustration, and then there's a whole nother editing stage. It's a slower process, but for me, that gives me a lot of time to prepare too. So, that's okay. I'd like to really kinda get ready for that launch myself.
Okay, yeah, well, that's interesting then. I think it's something that all authors can learn from also is that it might just be out of your hands. It might not just be rapid fire, get it out there. But it's a good thing because it does give you time to think about things. Maybe there might be something to change in the meantime or add to it or whatever it might be. And also gives you time to promote the book too and get on podcasts like this and chat about it and create.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. And, and so the traditional path is gonna be a lot slower. If you're gonna get traditionally published, that's gonna slow you way down. And so a lot of authors just choose to self-publish or hybrid publish, which is a lot faster process. So there's options based on, the kind of the goals of the author.
Understood. Yeah. So really cool stuff then. I guess all we can do is kind of stay in touch then and be on the lookout for the next guide. And in the meantime, check out the other guidebooks. So where's the best place for people to get connected?
The best place is my website, which is Jessica Speer, SPEER.com, and that has just a lot of resources and links to my books, links off to my socials, so and a way to connect with me. So if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to me directly through my website too.
I love that. Really cool. Okay. Well, you heard it there, guys. We're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today so you can go ahead and click on over and get in the know. I love it. But as we start to wrap up today, I'm curious to know, I mean, you're a award-winning author, so what advice do you have for aspiring writers, especially people who want to write for children and teens? Anything that we haven't already touched upon? Any last-minute bits of information? What do you think?
For me, it's been a game of persistence. It took me a really long time to get my first book out. I went
Mm.
through several genres. So I think persistence is the name of the game, and also finding a community. I mentioned earlier, when I started, I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators in Colorado. We have a really strong chapter in Colorado where we get together annually, and there's ways to, find critique partners and connect with other writers. And as a writer, that's really important, I find, just having a community that you're connected with to keep you inspired and to keep you learning.
Understood. Well, okay, I love that. So definitely something for us to hold on to and think about as we move forward with our day then. This has been a really fun conversation. I mean, if your books are anything like the way that you speak, like I said, it's very warm, it's very welcoming, and you have so many books that I think if any parent or teen has an issue, they can probably pick one up and at any one of them, they can probably find a solution. Because we talked about two of them, but we also have others. You have middle school safety goggles advice as well, which is more funny, right? So,
Mhm.
how many books in total? Just so we're clear.
I have 4 out now,
We're okay.
and then that one additional one that's coming out in 2027. And my latest book is actually a baby board book. So I did switch genres, but that was more just an idea from my publisher. And so I have a new cute little board book called 100 First Words for Little Coloradans. So that was just super fun to write, and really different, from what I typically do. But yeah, my middle school book, I spent, quite a bit of time studying and working with seventh graders to figure out some of the most challenging things about middle school. And so that book dissects the top 10 things that students told me. So every chapter is, one of the things that made the top 10 list. For instance, one actually is social media. That's a big challenge these days in middle school. Peer pressure, cliques and groups. So each chapter dives into those, but to make it fun, each one includes a choose your own ending story. So walking through a typical story that I would hear about, let's say, crushes and dating. So I'd hear a story maybe from lots of other students, and I'd write a choose your own ending. So in that book, they're reading through a really common scenario and they can decide, hey, how might I actually navigate this really tricky, awkward situation? So that was really, really fun to write. And what's so fun about that book is, when I'm working with students and they're reading those stories, I'll often hear, "Oh my gosh, that just happened to me." So it's just fun for them to relate, to these stories, because they're real common themes that many of us have experienced, during these periods of our lives.
That's really cool. I'm glad I gave you like I glad we touched upon this one too because it just shows a whole nother like genre and type of book that you offer. So yeah, like I said, any problem, any situation, you've got a book for everybody.
That's what
Well,
I'm shooting for. It's definitely in the
yeah.
preteens.
Perfect. Well, hey guys, go to the website then and click on over, see which of these books resonates most with you and your current situation. And until then, just at least get in touch for 2027 when the next one is ready to go. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Danielle, and thank you for just all this work, giving authors voices and space. So thank you for all
Oh,
the time and effort you're putting into this.
you're very sweet. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, thanks to everybody. Thanks for listening to everyone. We might as well say thanks to everyone. We're recording this in the Thanksgiving season, and it's probably not going to be released at the same time, but it is important to be thankful. So I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, guys, again, continue to, be your best self, continue to write and lead and keep inspiring, and we'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast. Have a great day, everybody. That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.